After the miserable failure to prove his authenticity by miracles, the Prophet of Islam had to encounter an even steeper mountain, where his knowledge was tested by the well-versed Jews of Medina. Let us see how he fared in that test and what happened after that event. Keep watching.
Welcome to another new episode of this series. Now that Muhammad had reached Medina after his hijrah, we will have a close look at some events that happened in the life of Muhammad. We already know that prophethood was imposed on Muhammad by Waraka and Khadijah. After some initial hiccups, Muhammad came to accept that this is the only possible role for him in the Arabian society. He spent 13 years in Mecca, and when he knew that his prophethood would not succeed there, he went out to Medina in search of a new hunting ground. This new hunting ground had a lot of Jews who were well versed in their scriptures and knew how to sieve the genuine from the fraud. While he was in Mecca, there were two men who knew that the Prophet of Islam had issues proving his genuinity when challenged by the people. These two were Nadir ibn Haris and Uqba, who made sure that the fraudulent ways of this new prophet reaches the Jews of Medina. We see the reference of these even in the Quran, where the people of Mecca knew that he was taking the things from the scriptures of Jews and Christians and adding his spice to make it look different. Surah 25 verse 4 and 5 makes it clear that the people of Mecca knew this new technique of Muhammad. Uqba and Nadir were specially killed by Muhammad at the Badr dacoity, because these two were the instruments to prove that he was a false prophet. It is very interesting that the Quran records the challenge of the Jews of Medina, which many scholarly Muslims understand, was an exposé of the Prophet of Islam. I also know that many lay Muslims will not even understand how the Jews prove the falsity of the Prophet of Islam. I will try my best to make them understand, but as it is based on a biblical debate, it is highly unlikely that they will understand or accept that fact. So let us see how this event of question-answer session of the Jews and Muhammad progressed. The Jews send the following questions by the hands of Uqba and Nadir. The questions were as follows. Number 1. What is the spirit? Number 2. What happened to the young boys? And number 3. Who is Dhul Qarnayn? Even today, Muslim scholars are totally clueless about the answer to these questions. Then consider the predicament of the Prophet of Islam, who had never read the Old Testament which the Jews asked the questions from. These three things which was asked by the Jewish scholars may appear to many as random and disconnected questions, but they are neither separate nor random. Meanwhile, these two men went back to the Quraysh and asked these questions to Muhammad. Muhammad, being Muhammad, asked for time till tomorrow to ask to his Jibreel to get back answers. According to Al-Qurtubi and Ibn Ishaq, Muhammad could not answer them the next day. As usual, he started giving excuses, quoting some random reasons by blaming Jibreel and Allah. He could not answer for the next 1 week. He could not answer for 15 long days. He had no clue what to answer. The prophet who promised to come the next day with the answer took a deep dive for 15 days, and the people around started mocking him and questioning his credentials. This proved that his prophethood became a suspect even to those people who followed him for the respect of Khadijah. Then finally the Prophet of Islam emerged out of the burrow claiming that the angel Jibreel came to him with the answer. His answers are recorded in Surah 17 and 18, which is the cause for much distress in Islamic circles. In Surah 17 verse 85, he comes with his answer to the first question, which he says he is given little knowledge about it. Of course, everything is in the domain of God. But the question was not about any spirit. If Allah was indeed God, he would have known the spirit in question here, and would have given the simple answer which would prove his genuinity. He totally missed out the questions from the Jewish scholars. I am sure that you are eager to know the true intent of the questions of the Jewish rabbis. For that, we need to get some historical background. The Christian scriptures were canonized in the 4th century AD. Canonization is a process by which the definite set of scriptures are considered as authorized and sealed. There will no more be an addition to the scriptures. Such a thing was not done for the Jewish scriptures till then. When the Christians canonized their scriptures, the book of Daniel was considered as a prophetic book. However, the Jews were still debating if the book of Daniel can be considered as a prophetic book or simply a literary writing of the Tanakh. The Christians had already considered Daniel into the Nevi'im category of the Old Testament. The Old Testament part of the Bible is called as Tanakh among the Jews. The Jewish Bible has 3 sections. The first one is called as the Torah. The second one is called as Nevi'im, which means the books of the prophets, and the third part is called as Ketuvim, which means writings. As you would notice in this chart, the book of Daniel is put in the writings group and not the prophets group. This was a raging debate within the Jewish community those days. The reason for the debate was that the prophecies in the book of Daniel was based on dreams and visions, which is not the usual norm. The other major prophets were directly inspired by the Holy Spirit to make their utterances. The Spirit in the whole debate is none other than the Holy Spirit. In Hebrew, the Holy Spirit is called as Ruach HaKodesh. In Arabic, the Holy Spirit is called as Ruh al-Qudus. Had Allah been the true God, he would have communicated it to his prophet. The Old Testament clearly defines and identifies as the Spirit in many places. In the English Bible, the writers make sure that they capitalize the Spirit word to clearly identify the Holy Spirit as the one being referred in the context. When the Jews heard the reply from Muhammad in Surah 17 verse 85, they established among themselves that Muhammad was indeed a false prophet. The Jews of Medina just confirmed what the Meccans had been saying all along. A fabricator cannot continue for long without being exposed. He met his match among the Jews of Medina. Now let us move to the second question about the young boys whom they asked Muhammad about. The young boys were none other than the 3 Jewish boys in the book of Daniel who refused to bow to the statue of King Nebuchadnezzar. They were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Interestingly, Muhammad was sent for a wild goose chase by this question about the young men. I suppose, had he been a bit smart, he could have asked other Jews about the hot debate in their society and could have got some clue. These questions are all from the book of Daniel, as the debate was about the prophethood of Daniel. For Christians, asserting the prophethood of Daniel was an easy task because Jesus had made certain comments which sealed the case for them. However, the Jews could not finalize on it, as they had scholars on both sides of the aisle putting forth their arguments. At the end, Muhammad came back with a Christian legend which does not have any connection with the questions of the Jews. Muhammad was misguided by his supposed angel Jibril. This Christian legend is a made-up story by a Christian bishop by name Jacob of Sarah. The purpose of this story was to make young men understand the importance of resurrection. The story is famously known as the 7 Sleepers of Ephesus, where 7 boys hid in a cave and slept. When they woke up, they realized that they had indeed slept for 300 years. These questions were a bit vague, and even though it could have confused Muhammad, Allah and Jibril could not have got confused. What does it show? Probably the Jews had a good laugh at the new prophet of Islam, who started representing the Allah of Islam in Arabia. The entire chapter 18 of the Quran is titled as Al-Kahf, which means the cave. Muhammad the prophet of Islam goes on a ramble about the long sleep of the lads in the cave till they woke up after many years. Needless to say, this story has got no connection with the 3 lads in the book of Daniel, which was at the center of the Jewish debate. How come Allah missed this by a huge margin? Do you want me to tell it? Yes, Muslim friends, your Allah was just a creation of Muhammad to deceive billions of people who would follow him not knowing his true antecedents. With 2 questions out of the way, let us concentrate on the third question. Who was Dhul Qarnayn? I suppose Muhammad would have done a lot of research to find this, and I appreciate that he somehow tried to find Dhul Qarnayn but got misled to assume him to be Alexander the Great, which was not the case. Dhul Qarnayn means the 2-horned ram. This reference is from Daniel chapter 8 verse 20, where the kingdom of Media Persia is symbolized as a 2-horned ram called as Dhul Qarnayn. Dul Karnain is an Arabic word, and the equivalent Hebrew word in the book of Daniel is Hak Karnaim. One horn represented Median, and the other horn represented Persian. This is about the kingdom that should be coming after the destruction of the Babylonian Empire, in which Daniel was a prominent official. The reason for the whole debate among the Jews and the Christians is because the prophetic writings of Daniel did indeed get fulfilled as he had predicted, and the Medo-Persian kingdom came into existence. It is quite probable that he got influenced by coins like these, which were reminiscent of the empire of Alexander the Great, and continued to speak about Dul Karnain as he was Alexander. This too comes from chapter 18, where he speaks in detail about the travel of Alexander to the extreme points of the earth, and that is how he inserted the famous blunder of Dul Karnain, having reached the setting place of the sun in a spring of muddy warm water, and the sun rising on the dark-skinned Africans, which made their skin that way. It is even more interesting that the reference to Alexander is in the very next verse, where he is referred as a goat with a large horn. How is it that the Trinity of Islam, Allah, Jibreel, and Muhammad missed this whole story and identified the symbolic kingdom of Medo-Persia as a person who traveled extensively and also obstructed the advance of Gog and Magog, which has absolutely no connection with the story? Now, coming back to the Jewish rabbis, what do you think would have happened after they heard of the Dul Karnain answer from the Prophet of Islam? Well, there is no record of them making fun of him, but it was quite an assurance that they did not miss out on any prophet. Needless to say that Muhammad understood that he flunked on the test, and hence he had to cover up his mistake. Therefore, he condemned his attitude in verse 23 and 24, trying to pull out of the embarrassing situation he got himself into. So now that the Meccans and the Jews of Medina think the same about Muhammad, they both have established for themselves that Muhammad was a fabricator and a false prophet. Why should we, or anybody for that case, think any different? Can any Muslim watching this video reply to this? I would like to end this video with a challenge to our Muslim friends. The challenge is this: send me 5 good things practiced by Muhammad in his lifetime, which any person can follow for a better life. It has to be appealing to the conscience of all humans and should be exclusive to the life of the Prophet. I am reiterating again, these 5 things should have been practiced by the Prophet of Islam, not just said, but practiced. Go ahead and put those things in the comment section.
We have come to the end of this video. If you have liked the content, please do punch the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Also, don't forget to click on the bell icon that will make sure that you are notified of all our latest videos. Till we meet again, may the good Lord bless you and keep you.